offseason preview time. The Memphis Grizzlies. Brendon, can I ask, is this maybe the weirdest season of any NBA team last year just because of everything that happened and how it kind of forced them to kind of like have a year where I don't know how you take very much of anything from it? Like, if you're them, and I know there's some coaching stuff on the assistant staff they've changed, and they made some trades, and you can take something away from them. You still have ideas about what you do with a team that has Ja Morant as the focal point of your franchise, and Jaren Jackson Jr. is your number 2, and all of that. And you still have Marcus Smart around, all of these things. You have ideas, I think, of what you'd want to do that are pretty logical. But such a weird year, considering, like, I don't know if there's anything in the data or the film you can really take and say, this is what we need. And, like, it's like a clear thing you can base off last year. Kind of has to go off kind of like what you think of the archetype of this team and kind of build off of that, because you didn't really get to see any of this come together last year. And that makes this such an interesting team for this offseason.
I mean, I think you do know, because they quietly, despite all the injuries and pretty much having a lost season as far as win-loss and competing for a championship goes, they have more chemistry in a longer longevity, I know that's not a word, core than anybody, pretty much, outside of like Denver. So, your team is Ja, Bane, and Jaren. I think Bane in particular, who we hyped up a lot throughout the regular season, took a huge step forward. That was only year 4 for him, so it makes sense. And really, it's just filling in around those guys like it always has been. You didn't get to see what Marcus Smart looked like next to anybody, because he had a lost season, which is probably the biggest disappointment outside of obviously Ja, who just torpedoed the season. But not trading for Smart, having him be the thing we were waiting so long for them to go get, and then just having a whole year lost without any data or evidence about him, that sucks. But on the plus side, I think the most Grizzlies fans probably feel like last year, when it was all said and done, it was about getting Vince Williams and Gigi Jackson as legit rotation players going forward. So, frankly, obviously Boston's not going to care about not discovering rotation players if they walk away with the championship, but it's not a lot of teams who can go through a season and say we drafted and developed and found diamond in the rough guys to fill 2 rotation spots on cheap salaries. So honestly, I feel really good about Memphis heading into next season. I think they're going to be right back up there as a championship contender. I mean, why not? They were up there before. They could be deeper now. They're a little more older and experienced. Bane took a huge step forward. Why could they not compete for a championship? This was a top 4 seed every year, as long as Ja's been healthy, since he broke out that first year they were an 8 seed. So you add 2 more rotation guys on the wing, sign me up.
The part of I think I find most interesting too is that I think there should be urgency for them right now. Ja's 25, Desmond Bane's 26, Jaren's 25. It's not like they are running out of time, but because they've been, to your point, they've been together for a little bit, because the expense is starting to kick in a little bit, you kind of got to start making some moves. And what they do and how aggressive they are, I think it's time to maybe be aggressive and throw some stuff around and be a little bit bold. And I wonder how aggressive they decide to be. Even with the draft, I look at that as that's the first domino that's going to fall. What it would cost, I don't know. But to me, them trading up for Kleen is just the most obvious thing I want a team to do in this draft. That is a guy that, even if I understand, if you're Kleen, maybe you'd want to go somewhere where you could be a more featured part of a team's build, like Charlotte. For instance, you would be a clear part of whatever they're going to build there and whatever's going to happen, start and be a focal point of a franchise. More opportunity for money down the line, perhaps, as well. So I understand there's part of that agent's direct stuff, all that. But if I'm Memphis, I look at that guy who's really smart, maybe potential to do some shooting, can play next to Jaren, can maybe fill this long-term need to have another center on your roster. Maybe you feel confident enough to find a way to use Brandon Clark's salary in a trade if you want to get a little weird and be a little more aggressive in that way. That to me just makes sense as go get a guy who's clearly, I think, going to have a high floor and be pretty good, cost control contract, cash in some chips, and then fill a real need on your roster that I think is staring them in the face, which is to get another big post the Steven Adams trade.
Yeah, Agreed. That is a need. I wouldn't trust Clark coming off of an injury.
An Achilles injury at that.
Yeah. I also won't pretend to know all the details, but the fact that it seemed like he could have played and didn't just felt odd to me. Just, is everything good? Did something go weird with the recovery? I don't know, but that you don't normally see that, like Paul George came back and played 4 games that one year after he shattered his leg. Like, guys just tend to, okay, I'm healthy, I'm here, let's go. And there was the strangeness about Clark may play, could play, won't play, whatever. I don't know. So it doesn't feel like that's just what you're going to say. That's our 25-minute per game center this year, starting backup, whatever. But because Jaren can play the 5, Klingon would be awesome. Of course, if they had a chance to get him, great. You mentioned Charlotte. I don't think he's fallen to 6, so you're going to have to go higher than even that to go get this guy, given we've already heard rumors about him at first overall, right?
I'm just gonna say this again now. I'm going to be, when we do our draft recap show, if Houston takes him at 3, I'm gonna F. Just let's Sengun Cook. Just getting that on the record now. Just saying that again. Said it twice.
Yeah, the rumors with that are also, forget Sengun, to be honest. I agree there, but also that you mentioned the Steven Adams trade. That's who traded for him. So
yeah,
what are we doing? But anyway, Klingon would be great, obviously. But I look at the lottery, and there's guys like Khalil Ware, Dayron Holmes. I know not all those players we think of as the 9th overall prospect, whatever. There are centers here to be had, is the point. And even if it's not Klingon, I think that is a goal of theirs. Big picture, so they have Luke Kennard on this team option.
$14.7 million.
Mm-hmm. And they have to decide on that by the 29th, so after the draft, but they might have they can make their intentions known before the draft, of course. I also look at their overall financial situation, which is that they are about a little shy of $500,000 over the tax line to be in that first apron as of now. That's with Kennard on their team, and you mentioned Clark being a salary they could potentially move. My goal, if possible, I know the money's not mine. We can do all that with the ownership, but being realistic, there is a little bit of uncertainty with Smart, with Ja coming back from injury again, with our Gigi and Vince Williams real, all that stuff. That I don't fully want to pay the tax if I can avoid it, because you're getting into repeater territory and the limitations of the apron and all that stuff. So can I improve the team and get under that tax line? That's
hold off a year on the tax, so it's like you get you proof of concept this year, and then a year from now maybe you throw some gasoline on the fire, and then you're really off and running.
Exactly, because you mentioned the timeline of their stars. The other thing, aside from them just having been together and being in their prime, and you just want to kind of do with that what you can, is they're all on their second contracts already, and they're all on maxes. Well, Jaren's on his 3rd contract, right? Technically,
yeah,
maybe got some kind of extension. So it's getting expensive at the same time. So that's kind of the other thing, is like you're not going to get any relief anytime soon. So the fact that you have your books worked in a way. But what's funny is you say that, and then their needs to me are more shooting and big man depth. So really the question is, if you do want to improve, which I think we agree they kind of still have to, and you're worried about the tax, it's like, well, can you actually get players better than Kennard or Clark? Because those two guys are also at your positions of need. So it's a little bit of a strange spot to be in, where you have the players, you kind of have a depth chart already. I wrote it out. I got to 9 guys I feel really good about. They could just roll into the season, have Clark be their other center, Kennard's kind of their last guard off the bench shooter, and they could just go there and maybe wait to the deadline to make an improvement. But they have a lot of options. I guess it's just about how can they kind of strike while the iron's hot. And like you said, what does the draft provide? They also have the 39th pick, which could be a player too.
The other thing I would look at too, if I'm them, is I would still feel the need to just get a little bit bigger on the wing. Even if you look at the depth chart and you feel good about some of this. If you're 4 guards, perimeter guys, you're relying on Morant, Bain, Kennard, and Smart. Even if Smart, we think of who defends up, all that stuff, that does skew smaller. That does skew a little bit light in a way that I would want to try to find something a little bit bigger. There's a reason that they were one of the teams that apparently offered a ton of first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. One of many teams that have done that over the years.
Before the Smart trade, though. See, I just think he's their guy, you know?
Yeah. Which, like, I get why they do that. I think, like, there is something to that. But, like, if you could exchange Kennard for someone slightly bigger at that roughly the same number, even if you have to pay a little bit more and you could find a way to deduct the tax another way, I think that to me would make a lot of sense. Like, could you, like, Laravia, like, maybe not Laravia is not the right answer, but if there's, like, another salary, is Conchar matter to you that much? Could you dump him somewhere else and do that and deduct the tax that way? Like, can you do little things on the edges but make a slight improvement to get a little more size in one of these other spots? But the tricky part with that is that if you wanted to get bigger there, that's the thing everyone kind of wants and needs that's really expensive, right? Like, that's the thing that the cost goes up for. That's kind of the inherent problem here.
Yeah, I think with Kennard or Clark, if you're trading those guys and trying to get something better than them, you're having to give up quite a bit, because I don't think, one, Kennard on a team option, like, that's nothing. That's just a salary slot. Nobody's valuing Kennard on an expiring contract by that point.
It's basically the mid-level. It's basically the mid-level essentially.
Yeah, I just mean from the receiving team standpoint, that's not value. So you're having to give everything you're giving in value is your own players, your own picks, whatever, to improve that spot. So, and same with Clark, because of the injuries and everything else. I don't think you're gonna say Clark and 39 and we got this great new toy to play with. You're probably having to give up future first and all that sort of stuff, which you don't want to do. So to me, I like kind of doing the exercise and thought experiment in my head. I don't know, unless they include 9 in a trade, I don't know what's there for them with either of those two players. And I think the question becomes, is something interesting enough to them to get more size, like you said, or a little more shooting, to trade Smart? And just say, we tried it, whatever, last year was weird, but this is our only pathway to a major improvement, so we're just going to roll it, keep it rolling, and Smart's really never going to get time with our core guys, and so be it. And that might be their only real pathway to getting a real difference maker. Probably not as good as Mikal Bridges, but I looked at to Brooklyn for Dorian Finney-Smith, who they've been connected to in the past as well. Maybe you get something else from Brooklyn too, in a trade like that, and you give up Smart and whatever else, and you get more of what you need. That might be their only pathway, because I don't think you want to give up those young wing guys we talked about, and like I said, the rest of the players are not very valuable to other teams.
And even like this free agency class, it's not like there's like an under the radar veteran that I'm like excited about trying to nab if I'm them. You know what I mean? It's like Jetty Osman on a cheap contract. It's like, Royce O'Neal like on a minimum. Like Gary Harris like on a cheap deal would be like okay, but is that like really needle moving for you based on the guys you have? I don't think any of these guys are demonstrably better or significantly different than what you already kind of have in house. To your point, and I also like even if there is going to be some ups and downs with Jackson. And with Vince Williams, more so with Jackson because he is still incredibly young.
He's 20, yeah.
He's 20. Like, I want those guys to play. I want those guys to get the reps because, like, that's how it's going to pay off for them in a year, 2 years, 3 years. When, Ja's 28, Jackson's 28, Bane's 29 or whatever, and those guys are okay. Like, then they're in their primes, and those guys have had the experience. And also, frankly, you get more information on when you have to pay them. Because like those you also have to be thinking about that stuff down the line too, and balancing the books like 3 years from now. That's the whole like balancing act teams are going to be running in this apron era. So it's really tricky. I think that's like part of the reason why I think if I'm them, I don't even want to consider trading the pick, because I think even if whatever you think about this draft, then they'll have their own read on it. Obviously, I would want to like take someone because I would want the cost control. Like part of the reason I think I'm okay for them, because you even whether it's Kleen, whether it's another center, whether it's one of the wings, I want the cost control and the opportunity to frankly make up for some of the misses on the draft they've had the last several years, whether it's Roddy, whether it's Kenneth Lofton, any of the other misses they've had.
Do you know what team David Roddy plays for?
The Phoenix Suns.
Nice.
Brendan,
it's very random. So I figured I'd throw that at you and see if you remembered.
Brendan, I was a David Roddy like obsessive when he came into the draft. I was like the frame, the weirdness of his game. I was like really in on David Roddy. I couldn't tell you why. There's something about him that I really, really liked, and it just hasn't really worked.
No. So, yeah, I hear you, and I think that's probably the smartest thing to do. I mean, I think there is an advantage to the teams in the range of like Memphis, Houston, of course, but Memphis, Oklahoma City, even Chicago, Sacramento, and then Miami, kind of to round out that lottery area, is just snap up whatever falls. And you're probably going to get a pretty decent shot at somebody who might be a little older, might be closer to a finished product. The other two centers I mentioned, Devin Carter, there's players like that who I think, could contribute right away. So Memphis could really benefit from that as well. And maybe, hell, I mean, would it be crazy if somebody they draft at 9, even if it's not one of the top names we're all hyped up about now, if it's somebody more in that middle tier, ends up being better than Kennard or Clark or G.G. Jackson next year? No, that wouldn't be crazy at all. That could easily be what happens here to give them that additional rotation piece that, again, I think we're in agreement. They're kind of 1-2 pieces away, but, I mean, the Thunder got Kasson Wallace, Derek Lively. We've been talking about those guys all season for a reason. If Memphis can be the team to kind of do that, easier said than done, but maybe that's their approach, and they just really like somebody at 9, and that becomes their 8th man, and they get better that way. So that's the other thing they got out of this season from hell is the 9th overall pick. So that helps too.
The last thing I think we should hit on is Ja, because didn't really see him last year. A lost season due to off-court stuff, due to the injury. What he comes back looking like health-wise, mentality-wise, like where he comes out of the summer and last year, what he comes looking like, I think that's maybe more important than anything we talked about, because that's the guy who drives this franchise. I mean, more than anyone else, more than Taylor Jenkins, who's a very good coach, more than Jaren, because we kind of know what Jaren's limitations are at the top end of things, more than Bane, who's really good and I really like. But Ja's the engine of this team. Ja's the face of this franchise. And where he ends up after everything that has gone on the last year and a half, all the noise, all the injury, like whatever, bad or good, whatever you want to say, where he comes out of this, Brendon, to me, and like what kind of player this next phase career look like, that's probably more important than any of this. Because like the ceiling they could reach, if they are going to be a title contender, none of it matters if Ja is not hitting another level and kind of hitting whatever his potential ultimately is.
Yeah, do you think where would you look if I were to come back in time from 2027 and I said Ja Morant got 10% better? Where would that come from?
I don't think it's defensively because he's just too small. Like I think that's always going to kind of be the thing. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pull up what his numbers are because I can't tell you off the top of my head, but like I'd want to say like pull up 3-point shooting would be the thing. Like if that he had to stop and
that'd be great.
Like
but that's a tough skill. I don't know.
But that's like the half court thing with him, right? That would like really like diversify his. Like I'm trying to think of how to diversify.
I mean, Ja Morant with a consistent pull up 3 is an MVP. So
that's kind of like the thing. It's like he's kind of already like. I don't mean to be like kind of like glib about it, but it's like But like Brendon, it's like that's kind of like the where he got in terms of like how the energy around him, in terms of the excitement around him. It's like kind of like that's like the part of his game that just didn't feel like it was totally like there on the offense.
Yeah,
like I felt like the package
sure.
on him was in there in a lot of ways to me.
But it doesn't mean he's necessarily going to add it, right? I guess
know,
where I'm going
like,
is like I think he may be somewhat of a finished product, because of the limitations of his frame. Like, I think some guys that are so polished so early, like especially if their size limits them, unless it, like you're saying, unless it is the shooting, there's not really a bunch of additional layers to what they're really going to be able to do. Like Kyrie Irving is a good example of somebody like once Kyrie hit a point, he's been that. And that's an all NBA caliber guy, but Kyrie didn't and then he did that. It's just, no, he was there and he stayed there and he's going to go to the Hall of Fame. So great. And I think Ja's on that track too, but I don't know, age 25 season, are we going to see a leap? Or that's why I was so excited to see what Bane did, frankly. Like Bane to me, I think his season got overlooked. Like the guy shot nine threes a game, 38%, 5.5 assists per game, upped his free throw attempts per game, scored 24 points per game, and he's not an amazing defender, but he has length, and he's already a little older. He's basically the same. He's older than Ja, so you just you're not worried about him. He's exploitable, like you said. They're small in the backcourt, but that's where I think the team's overall, half court, whatever, their offensive ceiling can go up is him and their partnership. So I want to see that. That's, I guess, the part of Ja coming back is how does it mesh now that Bane took this huge leap. That's where I want to see how Ja's game changes. It's not, to me, like him getting this extra level. It's, can he do a lot, be as impactful and valuable and important as he was to them when it was just his show, and share some of that responsibility with a bona fide co-star that he has now versus just this sharpshooter guy who would, come off screens and get some threes up, which is kind of what he was before last season.
And what does slightly more off-ball Ja even look like? We don't really know. Very low volume catch-and-shoot three-point guy for his career. I think there's opportunity for him to be a really dynamic cutter. But, it's pretty rare for a guy like him to want to cut.
Exactly. Yeah, so is Russ, right? How long was he going to say that one for?
Yeah, it took until he got to the Clippers to really want to do any of that.
Took until he was a minimum player on his way out of the league potentially to finally embrace that. So look, it's not even I don't criticize it. I get it.
No,
it's
just
you've been
like
doing this your
like
whole life. Do you want to go stand over there and sprint toward the basket and hope you get the ball? Like, you want me to do what?
Yeah. The only player who has ever willingly and this is part of his brilliance, that has ever willingly used a bunch of energy to run around for the sake of everyone else is Steph Curry. It's literally the only guy ever that has been willing to do that.
And when you do that, you win MVPs for it, right? So it's yeah, I mean,
and it also fit his skill set. He's also one of one in that way. It's Ja. If I think defenses in some ways would be excited if Ja was running around off the screens, he'd be great, we can just they'd be stoked.
Well, and look, I mean, the thing is, even aside from whatever he does off the ball, and if he's even comfortable or impactful or how he's deployed in that type of a situation, defenses aren't going to guard him.
No.
So that it's a maze. It's not an easy one to solve, but. Did I convince you? Do we got a championship contender on our hands, or am I ahead of my skis here?
If they were in the East, I could talk myself into it way easier. It's just the West is just such a bloodbath. It's just I don't know, you know what I mean? It's in the West, I feel there's almost a need to be more. If they were in the East, we could have a much more cautious offseason. I would be sure. In the West, I don't know if that gets it done.
I mean, 2022, they are. In the second round, they go to 6 games against the Warriors in a year that Golden State ultimately wins the championship. And in that series, Ja only played 3 of 6 games. That's the last time we really saw them at the peak of their powers. Ja was maybe not quite as good. He was even better the following season. Bane was definitely not as good. They did have Dylan Brooks and a healthy Brandon Clark. Melton was on the team. Kyle Anderson was on the team. But fill in Brooks for Smart and some of the other moves we've talked about. And if those young guys come along, they were right there last time we saw them healthy. And last time they were a real team. So last year, 2023, they imploded. Brooks is barking at LeBron and beefing with the media, and Ja's going off the deep end. So I kind of throw that in the trash. But
yeah, we're getting leaks the day the season ends. It's Dylan's not coming back. Weird times.
Exactly. So, but 2022, plus some development and depth and everything. I don't know. I'm just saying we shouldn't overlook them just because they had a weird year.